welcome to the celebration of Bible Sunday in the Diocese of Hamilton. My name is Christina Mines, and I am the Director of Evangelization and Catechesis for the Diocese of Hamilton. I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker for this year's presentation, Father David Perrin. David Perrin is Professor Emeritus at St. Jerome's University in Waterloo, Ontario. Formerly an Oblate of Mary Immaculate, since 2016, he is a priest of the Diocese of Hamilton. Father Perrin has been teaching Christian spirituality and ethics since 1994. He is the former president and vice chancellor of St. Jerome's University, a past president of the Society for the Study of Christian Spirituality, and was the dean of the Faculty of Theology, St. Paul's University in Ottawa. As a professional educator, academic speaker, and author, as well as a popular workshop and retreat director, he has given conferences, workshops, and retreats on a range of topics in Canada, the United States, and in Europe. He is the author of a number of books, which include his most recent work, The 20-Minute Retreat, 18 Sessions with the Saints to Nourish Your Faith. We welcome Father Perrin to share with us today a look through Luke, highlighting the Gospel of Luke, which we will have opportunity to discover in this lectionary year. Welcome, Father Perrin.
We are beginning the lectionary year C, which focuses on the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke has some special treats for us and some surprises. A look through Luke will give us an opportunity to examine some of them in detail. Let's look a little bit at the history and authorship of Luke's Gospel. St. Luke the Evangelist is believed to have been born in the early 1st century in Turkey. Most likely he was a Gentile who adopted Christianity later in life. He is believed to be the author of both the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. Luke's Gospel was probably written sometime in the 80s, long after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Luke worked as a physician and at one point was a companion of Paul the Apostle. Paul, in his letter to the Colossians, referred to Luke as the beloved physician and as a co-worker. Like Paul, Luke had to earn a living. Paul did this as a tent maker, Luke as a healer, as a physician. But Luke's focus throughout his adult life was about the advancement of the Christian mission. Again, like Paul, Luke was not a direct witness to the ministry and the life of Jesus Christ. Turkey, the crossroads of civilization at the time, was far from the little-known region of Galilee, where the ministry of Jesus unfolded. Luke was well informed about the events following the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and he was well positioned to write about them with authority, conviction, and knowledge. So what was the literary style of Luke? How did Luke write his gospel, and how do we describe his technique? While scripture scholars largely describe the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, which were written much before Luke's Gospel, and the Gospel of John, written well after, they describe it as biographical narrative. These scholars describe the literary style or the genre of Luke's Gospel as historical narrative, different from the others. Historical narrative includes historical and biographical notes as well as heroic stories. Of course, it also includes miracles, healings, and parables. But the other Gospels contain these things too. Therefore, you might ask the question, what makes Luke's Gospel different? Ancient biographical narrative has as its focus the individual to be followed. They often introduced their main subject at the very beginning of the text. Like Matthew, Mark, and John, they all named Jesus in some way as the text focus right away. Chapter 1, verse 1. But Luke, he doesn't mention Jesus until chapter 1, verse 31, well into the gospel. Instead, Luke follows the tradition of ancient historical narrative, which has as its focus the events and the explanations of why things are the way they are. What Luke introduces in chapter 1, verse 1, are the events that have been fulfilled among us. He does not name a person right away, but references events that have occurred. He plans on describing these events throughout the gospel, and so he does. Thus, Luke is more historical in nature than biographical. This is an important point, since Luke leads us to focus on the Christian movement and its origins. Of course, Luke does not ignore Jesus as the founder of the movement. And so as we celebrate lectionary year C, the liturgical cycle that highlights Luke's gospel, what might be some of the stories that we will hear? Luke spins his own original presentation of material that is also found in the other Gospels. However, the Gospel of Luke contains many unique texts not found in either Mark or Matthew, which were written prior to Luke, as I mentioned earlier. For example, the visitation of Mary to Elizabeth, read during Advent in year C of the liturgical cycle, as well as the birth of Jesus, read on the feast of Christmas at Mass during the night. In all three liturgical cycles, A, B, and C, are unique to Luke. But there are many other examples of stories told by Luke that are not found elsewhere. I'll mention some of these shortly, but they are even more beyond this list. Can you imagine how different our understanding of early Christianity and the person of Jesus would be without the following events having been recorded? You recall the great catch of fish in Luke chapter 5. A woman anoints Jesus' feet and accompanies Jesus, chapter 7. Jesus heals 10 lepers, chapter 17. The parable of the Good Samaritan, chapter 10. The parable of the rich fool in chapter 12. The parable of the prodigal son in chapter 15. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, chapter 16. The parable of the Pharisee and the publican. Jesus' appearance to the 11 after the resurrection, chapter 24. Can you imagine our Christian life without any of these stories that Luke offers us? And so, how might we respond to this message of Luke, to these stories which he brings to us unique to his gospel, not found in the others? There are a number of points I would like to present. First, seek to understand better the universal nature of the Christian message. Luke paved the way for early Christianity to understand its own uniqueness, that is, separate from Judaism, yet continuing its relationship with Judaism and the world. The emphasis on the universality of the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is evident in Luke. Luke shows Jesus extending his message to everyone. The other gospels do this as well, but not with such force, such clarity. and conviction. For example, only Luke has Jesus send out 72 disciples to minister, sending them to the known world at the time. A second suggestion on how we might respond: work to advance Christianity's social commitment. Luke's universalism extends far beyond the ethnic and the geographical. Perhaps more importantly, it includes the social. The newly founded religion appealed to people of all socioeconomic levels, although Luke has a particular focus on the poor, the marginalized, and the forgotten. Luke portrays Jesus as a social reformer. For example, Luke reshapes the Beatitudes in a very important way. Luke says, "Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who are hungry now." You see, Luke speaks directly to the people and not in Matthew's third person. Matthew says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice." Not quite as powerful as Luke saying, "Blessed are you who are poor and you who are hungry now." Luke's people are poor and not in spirit. They are hungry and not for righteousness. They need money and they need food, and Jesus calls them blessed. A third way we might respond to Luke's gospel during this liturgical year: believe in the power of prayer and find ways to deepen your prayer life. Luke shows Jesus praying at times of great importance. For example, Luke alone of all the Gospels indicates that Jesus prayed after his baptism. Jesus' baptism marked the beginning of his public life and was an appropriate time to ask for help. What small steps can you take to deepen your prayer life when things are going well and when there are challenges to be met? A fourth way we might respond to Luke's gospel this year: open your mind to an enhanced role for women in the church and in society. We see in Luke's gospel a focus on one particular marginalized group: women. In Luke's gospel, women appear often and have significant roles to play. They are not supporting actors, but are the main players in many of the events recounted by Luke. This includes Jesus' mother, Mary. Most of what we know about Mary comes from Luke's gospel, and the conversation between Mary and Elizabeth is the only conversation between two women in the entire New Testament. While Matthew indicates that the angel of the Lord delivered the announcement of Jesus' birth to Joseph, the man, Luke's gospel tells us that the Annunciation was instead given to Mary, the woman. How could Jesus and his disciples continue their mission of evangelization without money for food and lodging? It was women who provided them with funds to continue their work. Luke elevates the status of women in the life of Jesus and also, therefore, the life of the church and society. A fifth way that we might respond to the Gospel of Luke during this liturgical year is to work at how we can better offer mercy, forgiveness, and reconciliation in our lives. Luke portrays Jesus as offering endless mercy and forgiveness. Despite human beings' lack of fidelity and tendency to fall short of our ideals, Luke's gospel portrays God's unlimited goodness, a God who meets each of us in a personal way. We see this on the road to Emmaus. God heals our broken humanity. We see this in the parable of the prodigal son. God turns upside down our too easily accepted norms as to what it means to follow God's ultimate law of love. We see this in the woman who anoints Jesus' feet. God breaks open our shallow understanding as to who belongs to the kingdom of God. We see this in the parable of the Good Samaritan. A sixth way that we might respond to Luke's gospel during this liturgical year is to be aware of how spiritual pride affects your faith life in subtle ways. Like Matthew, Luke expands on the story of the temptation of Jesus in the desert that is first told in Mark. But Luke relates the story to the ordinary believer. We all know the story very well. Jesus is tempted by the devil 3 times in the desert. First is the offer of abundant food, immediate gratification on the physical level. And second is the offer of all the kingdoms of earth, power and wealth. Many of us have done what Jesus did, rejecting the first 2. We've disciplined our physical desires and managed to hold in check whatever power and wealth we may have at our disposal. But here is the trap of the devil. We know that we are fundamentally good people. And of course, we check ourselves on these other 2 levels. And we feel good about this, which leads us to spiritual pride. This is why the third temptation is so insidious. Knowing how good we feel about how we conduct ourselves, the devil brings forth the third temptation, the offer to put God to the test. What would be wrong with Jesus hurling himself from the temple and being saved by the angels, and thus showing the power of Jesus? And along with this, if we are so good at managing the first 2 temptations, why shouldn't we allow ourselves a little leeway now and again? But doing so would be putting God to the test and placing ourselves above God. And so let us bring to closure these brief reflections on Luke's gospel during this liturgical year. Luke called the church back from focusing on the precise time of the Lord's return and reminded the followers of Jesus that there is an ongoing mission to accomplish. We participate in this ongoing mission, and we are blessed to do so. We are blessed through our baptism to be part of it, as we have seen in the preceding reflection. May God bless you during this year of Luke.